Okay, good morning everybody. Thanks for the opportunity to come down and speak to you all today. My name's Paul Marlow. Just a little bit about myself. 21 years ago, I would have been 21 years old and worked for a record label. We sold 3 million copies of a tune, and that kind of was my entry into the music industry. It charted globally, even in New Zealand, and it kind of set us up for a number of years in the entertainment business. In 1993, the British government brought in the Criminal Justice Act, which meant that any outdoor event or any event with more than 5 people required a licence. We were fortunate enough to show that we were industry-based and organised to put on suitable events, and for 8 years we were the only people in the UK that were allowed to do all-night events. These were events with 30,000 people, and we did that annually for several years. We also had a nightclub that ran every week for 8 years. We had a lot of success in business. We did events in Europe, we toured the States, and ever since then I've made records and been DJing. I emigrated to New Zealand 12 years ago. I've been a citizen here for 6 years now, and I DJ at a number of bars and clubs around Wellington. Unfortunately, I think this whole hearing is kind of faulted. Unfortunately, central government has imposed a set of legislation on us, which is, to be perfectly honest, it's, as John Key says, will kill Wellington. The entertainment here is second to none. I mean, I've travelled the world, I really have, and I've been very, very happy to settle here, and I've had a great time living in Wellington, and I can't imagine myself living in any other city until now. I'm very disappointed by this. My New Year's Eve gig has already been cancelled. 7's next year. I had 2 gigs, they've already been cancelled. 2 of the bars where I play are closing as a direct result of this new legislation. One of them is closing on the 18th of December, and the other one is closing on New Year's Eve. So, I mean, that's a third of my income. So what am I to do? Sign on the benefit now? Because there are no new venues going to open. No one's going to invest money in bars in Wellington. It costs at least $500,000 to open a decent bar in this town. And people aren't going to put the money in. They're really not going to put their money into this city. I mean, I was looking at this a couple of years ago, and I kind of count my lucky stars, really. I was sensible. I'm doing something completely different with my money. I'm actually in the middle of a consent process to open up a cable weight park out in Porroroo, which I'm sure you'll all hear about in the next couple of months when the submission goes in. But anyway, I'm really glad that I didn't put that $500,000 into a bar, because I'd have gone through a consent process, I'd have obtained my licence, and the rug would have been pulled out from underneath me. Business models are based on what your licensing requirements and obligations are. And when they get changed unnecessarily or unduly, without any real... I mean, I wasn't aware of any notification process for central government changing the regulation, and it seems to have just fallen down on local government. And I feel for you. I'm not sure what the overall kind of general consensus is with the councillors and the mayor, but I feel for you having to go through this whole process. I know it's very costly and it's very time-consuming and quite stressful for all people involved. So I just felt that I had to come down and put my hand up and just say, look, I hope that you try and keep the regulations or the licensing as it is currently when you go forward. But unfortunately, it is a little too late. That 4-month period between the new legislation coming into place and councils being able to issue new licences for potentially later licences. Most of these bars can't survive through that period. One of the bars I work in, 60% of their turnover is after 2 o'clock in the morning, and he's already said now that's it, he can't. He's been open for 14 years. We've ridden the recession out. Year on year we've done better with bar tape since I've been there, and I've been there 6 years now. And this is just a nail in the coffin that's just one too many. So it's really unfortunate, but I can see a lot more bars going this way. I know of 5 bars already closing. I know of 3 more people who've got their bars on the market. Just slightly outside, just to go outside of Wellington, I know in the Waikato, all of the bars are owned by 2 groups. They've all now just turned around and said, that's it, throwing hands up, they're selling up, they're moving out. There won't be any bars there in 6 months. So, I mean, there'll be an opening for people to come into the market, but this is something that's going to kill the nightlife. And Wellington won an award last year for Best City. It won't win it again, unfortunately. I really believe that's the case. Okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm sure there'll be some questions. I've certainly got one, but I'll start with the Mayor, then Councillor Ritchie, and then Councillor Bennett. Oh, Councillor Morrison, right, okay.
Thank you very much, and thank you for coming in, and we do appreciate the contribution you made. should be, but are you aware that the whole of local government has agreed that if there's an agreed local policy, there shouldn't be a default? We haven't yet persuaded central government, but with the hospitality industry, you perhaps in particular, be interested in coming with us to meet Minister Judith Collins, so that whatever we agree about the hours, we don't have to stick with the default hours from central government for that 3 or 4 months.
Very much so. Tell me where I need to be and when. I'll be there. Definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I haven't.
Excellent. Okay. Councillor Morrison.
Yeah, thanks for coming in, Paul. In your experience in what you're doing, you explained how you operate in a number of bars, etc., DJing, what have you. Has there been any problems?
I've been DJing at Vespa now for 5.5 years, nearly 6 years. In the whole time I've been there, I've seen 2 fights inside the bar. On the whole, they're dealt with very quickly by security. We've got very good security. Most of the problems we have are outside the bar, with people being declined entry because they're intoxicated. I mean, I work at Vespa Lounge, one of the bars, and also at Apartment Bar, so both on Allen Street, so it's not quite as crazy as Blair Street. We tend to pride ourselves on not being quite as commercial. We're a little bit more diverse on our music. But Vespa Lounge is about halfway down Allen Street, and we can see them walking down the road, and if there's any slight wobble on it, it's just like, no, you're not coming in. And that's generally the cause of arguments, is people being declined entry. But we see people on the street sitting in their cars, knocking back the beers before they go off out, and they are preloading, it is a problem. I'm not suggesting that alcohol should be increased in price in off licences or supermarkets or whatever, but I think that the police could possibly do more. At the moment, I do a walk around the block each weekend just to see what's going on elsewhere. And I walk down Blair Street, and there's like girls laying on the floor, chucking up everywhere. And there'll be like 4 or 5 of them, cops standing right next to them, doing nothing. And they'll come around the corner and they'll pester us, hassle our doorman to wear a high-vis jacket, and just making the most ridiculous requests. Terry Fraser, the new cop in charge of the bars around town, is particularly vicious towards all the bar owners. A lot of people were not very happy with his style. He came in at Vespa Lounge the other week and started checking pies for dates. Not joking. It just goes to show that I don't believe the cops are doing as much as they could do, and I think it's in their interests not to, because it shows that the problem's a greater problem than it really could be.
Yeah, thanks, Paul.
Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
How many bars are there in Wellington?
We've got those numbers.
Sorry.
Yeah, I know that when Vespa Lounge opened up, there were only probably half a dozen or so. Now there's quite a saturated market. There are a large number of bars, I wouldn't be able to say.
Councillor Richard, we've got those numbers.
I heard you say that. I didn't ask you to.
No, but I don't want time wasting for questions we should know.
Can I carry on so that time is wasted?
Please.
Thank you. I agree with you that that's what you're saying, that Wellington is the music capital, I think, of the world. There's this whole secret, wonderful...
Definitely the Southern Hemisphere, for sure.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of talents come out of this country in the last few years.
And there are various venues that are important for that. Do you know, the 2 bars that you quoted, whether there were other factors in their closing, like, for example, earthquake strengthening requirements?
No, absolutely not. Vespa Lounge is 100% purely based on this new legislation. You're probably all aware that Sandwiches nightclub closed last weekend. That was partly due to seismic strengthening. However, had this new licensing hours not come about, then they'd have been able to work out a formula to have been able to trade beyond where they currently are. So it's partly because of seismic, but it needed to be done. But the owners of the building were understanding. They've been tenants there for 10 years. I've had chats with Wade and Bryce on the weekend, went to the closing night on Saturday night. Very sad night for a lot of people involved. And they would have carried on. They would have been able to trade through it had this not happened.
Councillor Fanning.
Thank you very much for coming in. I see that you're happy with shorter licensing hours, or shortening opening and closing hours for the supermarkets and bottle stores. And yet we're going to have the supermarkets come in and say, it's not us, it's other people that are the problem. Do you see that that everyone has a collective responsibility, that we all might have to take a little bit of the cost to try and address alcohol abuse?
I think at the moment the burden is heavily loaded on the bars and the licence holders for the venues around town. I mean, we have a responsibility to not allow intoxicated people on site. We have a responsibility for their health and safety while they're on site. So, there's a number of factors within the licensing regulations and RMA for opening of a bar that kind of covers that from the bar owner side of things. I mean, at the end of the day, you can't blame the supermarkets either. It's people who are to blame, and their own individual habits. So I don't think that you could. I don't know that you can necessarily blame the breweries or the supermarkets. But I mean, when I first got here, I live out in Teesside Bay, and the Pack and Save was open 24 hours, and Countdown was open for 22 hours a day, both of which you could buy alcohol. And we thought it was great. Oh, I'll come home from work at 5 in the morning and buy some beers. If we get home at 7, my local dairy's selling beer at 7 in the morning. Well, the local dairy no longer sells beer at 7 in the morning, nor does the one down the road. And I actually think that's a really good thing. I do agree that it's a good thing. And I think that, a 9 o'clock cut-off for alcohol in supermarkets isn't such a bad idea. I think it's already good that they don't sell hard liquor and it's only beer and wine. But I don't think that I don't think you can put the blame onto the supermarkets either. They're just selling a product at the end of the day. It is really down to the individual. Actually, one point I didn't raise actually is the big concern I have for this whole thing is that if the licensing hours are cut shorter, the party's just going to go to the suburbs. Council are going to need a hell of a lot of noise control officers because the problem isn't going to go away. They'll have 10,000 people or a few thousand people waiting for taxis trying to get out of town, and when they do, they'll be taking the party home. Instead of it being in central Wellington, it will be in suburban areas, and you'll have a lot more noise control complaints. I'm absolutely certain of it. I've seen it in the UK.
One question from me, Paul, quickly. I know that at times I'm sorry to move on. The problem you're talking about at the moment is the 4-month default.
Yeah.
Okay. The outcome you'd like, let's say the fact didn't exist, the outcome you would like to see would be what in terms of the hours? I'd like to see status quo. I'd like to see it the same as it is. I mean, well, I'm at Vesper Lounge. Vesper Lounge is open until 7. 60% of our trade is after 2 or 3 in the morning, and we're really busy from about 4:30 through till 7. Now, we don't allow drunk people in, but most of the people who are there, they work in the hospitality industry. So when they finish working at Hummingbird or wherever, they come to us for a beer because they want to have their Friday night and wind down as well. We don't get those drunk interviews, we don't want them. And you're okay or not okay with the precinct concept?
I think that's a little bit debatable. I need to give it further consideration. I think zoning, which is under the district plan at the moment, should work effectively. I think that restricting it to a district of just being Courtney Place and Cuba Street will have an effect on the rents of the buildings in those areas, which are already disproportionately high. But if you've got one bar which is just off of a side street there and they're outside of that precinct, then I think it's very unfortunate for those people. But I just think that zoning within the district plan should be able to cater for that. Maybe that itself needs some modification when the district plan comes up for review, but I think that should be catered for